Welcome back, fellow travelers, to the Never Ending Adventure podcast. I'm one of your co-hosts, Russell Tyndall, and with me, as always, is Nettie P, DJ Nettie P.
DJ Nettie P, that's me.
Yeah, how's it going, G? But it's great to be back home.
As
I feel like we always say whenever we start this podcast, G, but it's great to be back home. Which, that's in this. I started to sound like a certain politician, just repeating crap that I just said, but. I bring this up because this is something that's said in this episode that we're going to be covering today on Adventure Time. And I just can't hear the words G, but it's great to be back home without thinking about Simon and Garfunkel. And so all of today I've just had, I believe that's Keep Your Customer Satisfied or Keep Your Customer Satisfied, I believe is the name of that song. So I just got that tune. I'm just jiving.
I'm not a deep cut art Simon and Garfunkel fan, so
I don't think that's too deep of a cut, but I will say it is not like Sound of Silence or something like that, or I don't know, a Bridge Over Troubled Water or something. But
the further we get away from the 80s, though, the more that stuff is going to be deeper cut for sure.
Yeah, for sure. I don't know what album set off of, but my stepbrother once told me he doesn't do enough drugs to want to listen to Simon and Garfunkel or to understand it. And I don't understand that. I don't understand that take. I think Simon and Garfunkel is for everybody. And I think it's for this podcast. And it's for us. And it's for Mr. Fox.
Mr. Fox. Because he's depressed.
You can't tell. We're talking about season 5, episode 23. Another 5 more short Graybles.
Wow. Is it episode 23 or 24?
I don't know, man.
I think it's 24. We've got through so 24. Many of them.
It's 24.
It's hard to know because if this was a normal season of Adventure Time, we'd be coming up on the end of the season and we're coming up on the halfway point of season 5.
Yeah, that's so wild. But I do think before we hop into what I think we're all a little resistant to do anyways, because how many more Graybles can we have? Hopefully this is the last one.
I think we've got... Gosh, if I'm not mistaken, there's 2 more after this.
Oh my gosh.
But they end up being kind of Grayble-y, but it expands onto Q*bert's universe. So just know that we have that coming a little bit.
I don't know if I care about Q*bert. I'm sorry, y'all.
I honestly, they're not my favorite. And it's Q*bert's universe, but it's technically like, I don't want to spoil it, so I can put
it's Futureverse.
A spoiler drop.
Spoiler drop.
It is future based. So we
kind of knew that. And he always says, let's go, like before this, he goes, all right, another story from the past. Like he talks about that. So like we kind of get that it's a little bit of the future. I don't think that's a huge spoiler for me or for anyone else that's also a first time Adventure Time viewer.
Before we get into the meat of the episode 2, one of I had a fake kind of, I know the Q*bert story, but this is a good segue. Fiona and Cake, this season 1 that came out this year, opened up a little bit more of how the multiverse theory works in Adventure Time. And I kind of had a theoretically speaking, about how this kind of potentially plays into a theory of like how Prismo operates with the universes. So like, I know in the future, this spoiler drop that I had, it's going to be like Futureverse, and it's technically this universe. But in a different way, I was like, what if Prismo beaming the Fiona and Cake universe into Ice King's head, and basically that universe kind of living separate and protected from the other cosmic entities that live out there? What if this is like version 1 of Prismo experimenting with like creating universes, was like basically creating little cubes, little, Graybles of Finn and Jake's universe, and, like shooting them out into random places. And Q*bert's like either the caretaker or the guardian or the collector of these like universal Graybles. And he he's kind of like Ice King. They're not getting beamed into his head, but they're getting beamed into his like library. So he's like some sort of like book caretaker of this weird hypothetical universe. And so all of what he knows, he's just looking into one story at a time, similar to how Ice King writes the Fiona and Cake novels when they get like beamed into his head,
No, I think that's a good point. I mean, we hear in this episode that Graybles is his trade, right?
Mm-hmm.
He's not a birdhouse or a bird guy, even though he's dabbling, certainly. And I think what we all know
birds
is
in his spaceship.
Yeah, well, what we all know is Russell's future favorite pastime is bird watching. And therefore, I had to, this episode, have Cuber be my lovely.
Oh,
because,
all right.
Of
Give me
course,
some sugar, baby.
you know, he's in this episode. He's like, all right, let's build a house or a birdhouse or whatever, and he's just railing away with two hammers, no nails anywhere in sight. I love that we just pan on him, just like bam, 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 bam. You know, I thought that was so funny. So one of my favorite moments of this episode, certainly. But even like what you were just saying, like, why are there so many birds? How do we have so many birds on this outer space spaceship?
Yeah,
it brings up a good question. I mean, are there bugs everywhere? Does he just have a bug infestation? Because there are hundreds of birds, and I think birds are pretty dirty animals. There's got to be lots of poop. There's got to be lots of bugs. And if there's not lots of bugs, then he's got a worm farm that we're not seeing. He's just got a million worms somewhere that he's just having to grow constantly for these birds to have something to eat on.
Yeah, my bird theory, especially more along the lines of it fitting is this is like future verse, is that he's like protecting, like something's going on in Oo specifically. That would have been kind of, you see it later on. Again, I'm not spoiling too much. Like the Oo is not as put together as it is right now. So maybe he's like saving the birds from something that's going on down in Oo, and for a very short period of time, and then going to like let him.
I mean, I wouldn't be surprised at all, man. He doesn't. My issue with Cuber in this episode, even though he is my lovely, we don't get to see him build the birdhouse at all. We're panning over. The birdhouse is built. All that's missing is the door hole, and he uses this in his freaking Dora the Explorer styled intro.
That's why he got most punchable
to go to the Graybles. He's just like, I'm trapping you. We are going to the Graybles. You have no choice. Oh, by the way, I think I left my door hole story or how I built a door hole for a birdhouse and some Graybles. So let's go check that out, kids. Yeah. I'm like, fine, I guess. Bring us along. Even the cameraman is like shaking his head no.
Yeah,
like,
no, I don't want to hear the Grayble.
I'm pretty good. I don't really want to do Graybles this episode.
And I think that's funny too, because it's kind of acknowledging a little bit of like the audience is being like, okay, we're kind of done with these like Grayble episodes a little bit. And so I don't know if they're poking fun at themselves for that or not too.
I think they are a little bit. Okay. I think they get that the audience isn't exactly coming here for Graybles, you know, like we're here for something else, something deeper, something more meaningful, something Finn and Jake, you know.
Yeah,
I don't need
Russell wants those canon episodes, man. We're getting like season 5 has a lot of good canon episode bangers.
Good Adventure Time
episodes.
We're just here for good Adventure Time episodes, and you know, like I just kind of jokingly said, 5 stages of grief is what these episodes are about. Or I think every one of the Graybles is one different stage, but I gotta say, it went way over my head. It wasn't very freaking obvious. Well, just because they say at one point, they say it, you know, all except for one of them. I think in anger, they don't ever say I'm angry. You know, it's just the lemon grabs arguing or whatever. But dude, that kind of bothered me a little bit. I was just
I would say I'd say it's kind of a twofold approach on this Grayble, and I think this is what kind of this episode, and maybe what they're poking fun of as the writers on this episode, is that the thing that like all these Graybles are in one, like, you know, like little Grayble. So they like, what's the 5 sides of this, you know, pyramid that tie this story together? Why is this one Grayble and not 5 different ones? Like, why is a Grayble not just 5 days of Finn and Jake? What ties? So I think they have to be tied together with a theme, even if it's very like loosely connected. Mm-hmm. And that what the writers are doing, they're like, yeah, that's going to be the obvious like 5 sides of this pyramid, but I think the stories have a lot. They're all connected in a deeper way than what's like the surface value Grayble is.
Yeah, you know? Let's get into the stories, and then we'll summarize what the Graybles are and how each stage relates to each Grayble after we've kind of discussed the Graybles for context, because I mean, some people may not be necessarily watching along with us each week, and are kind of going back from memory. So, and all the Graybles,
and after lots of Grayble episodes, it's good like
they bleed
rehash of
together.
what's going on.
Yeah, certainly. And this one's great. I mean, we start out with Jake Jr., who we just saw is, she says she's 30 in this episode, or like about 30. And in the last episode, during the heists that she was committing with Jake's old crew, she was like 22, I want to say. So she's growing up hella fast.
Yeah.
But I love that we get to get a little bit more of one of Jake's kids and get to see a little bit more of him being a father. And honestly, like, even though she's too old, whatever, for imaginary time machines and stuff, or like to play imagination, it's still really nice to be like, I don't know, he's just being sincere. Like Jake's being like trying to be a good dad and trying to be entertaining and all that. And how could you keep up? I mean, I'm assuming as a father, you feel like your kids are probably outgrowing the things. I mean, that's probably a very natural feeling. But these kids are on hyperdrive. I mean, Jake Jr. is going to be 100 and dying before Jake is 5 years old.
And especially because the last 30. Episode was one last job. I don't think Jake Jr. is really 30. It's just more of like somewhere in theory with like maturity where it's going to be. Because like obviously like Lady Rainicorn.
They must start the plateau, right? They must like hit a point and then start to plateau age-wise.
And that's what I'm thinking too, just along the lines of like Lady Rainicorn as well. Because like I think that Rainicorns have a longer lifespan themselves, but she's obviously not like an old lady because she's hundreds of years old or whatever. So.
Yeah, she's there just like drinking some strawberry juice, hanging out. I'm sure they don't know about fermentation, or maybe at least Finn and Jake haven't discovered it, because otherwise I think Finn and Jake, or especially Finn, would be trying to get drunk every episode, and we don't need a TV show like that. I think we already have that 70s show.
Exactly. But with Jake Jr., I think it's a cool part, and it'll get down into my deeper thoughts later. But she's obviously gone from, I don't know, maybe stopped heisting, and now she's getting existential. Like,
that
like,
future
where's
dread,
my life
man.
going? The future dread. You know, and that's, I mean, it's probably a multi-pronged approach, but I know in the analysis of grief, this is supposed to be the acceptance phase, and that doesn't really make sense except for Phoenix package from
exactly. And we'll get to
Jake
that later on. But it is interesting that Jake Jr. is simply just like, I mean, the quote I have where Jake Jr. is sitting on the couch and thinking about the future and the present and where we are with technology and all this, which, I mean, I think we're all having a little bit of AI dread, or even just, you know, like AI confusion, because what's AI and what is just a smart algorithm? You know, that's my issue with it. But so Jake Jr. says, we're on like the bleeding edge of history. Everything ahead of us is totally unknown, and there are no guarantees that everything is going to be all right. It's exciting, but it's also pretty scary. And I think that's a great point. I mean, we really, thinking about like what our government is sending troops here and there, and this is happening, and so and so is invading so and so, and like, dude, I mean, one lunatic drops a nuke, and who knows what's going to happen, or AI gets a little too smart. It's like, we can't just be like thinking about that all the time, because you would never do anything. Like, you wouldn't be motivated to go to the gym because you're like, well, what's it matter, or whatever. Like, and then chances are nothing's going to happen in our lifetime. I mean, knock on wood, I sure hope nothing does, but, and you just got to keep going. So is that acceptance? Are we accepting that the future is bleak to some degree at some point in future history? Do you have kids? Do you not have kids? Because do you want to bring a kid into the world of what the future might end up being? I don't know.
Mm-hmm. That's why there's a difference. Lesson? There's a difference between existentialism and nihilism. If you can go down that existentialist path so deep to where it just becomes nihilistic, and then you can go so deep down the existentialist path that it becomes culty religious. You can go. There's several branches of that kind of thought, but I think essentially what I think is the defining moment here, and why this is happening in the treehouse, why this is happening with Jake and Finn right there, is that Jake Jr. is having that moment of growing up and kind of hitting that moment of like, yeah, like everything is unknown. Like, what am I doing here? What am I supposed to be scared? And in that moment, though, she's watching her father and Finn like play make believe. And, later on in the episode, because we might as well break this down too, because it finishes out in this part of the episode. She's like reading the magazine. She's like, as long as you guys are having fun, is what she tells Finn and Jake. And they're having a blast and they're having fun. And she kind of, I think at the end of it is okay with, she's like, oh yeah, like this was fun. I had fun hanging out with my dad. Yeah. And that's like where the fear of all that kind of like washes away when you're just like with loved ones having a good time. Yeah, that you do realize, so that's where I think the whole Jake Jr. one like really comes full circle at the end.
Yeah. And I think you're already seeing that everything is a lesson in this episode. So we probably won't even need to do lessons at the end of this podcast, which is great. But I got to say, let's give a little shout out, not a tops for this episode, but a shout out to a new Jake power, which to be honest is kind of insane.
I was going to ask you what you thought about this because there is an awesome episode later on where Jake basically falls in such a deep sleep that he stretches inside of himself, and there is a universe of himself inside of himself.
Whoa.
And it's like this micro stretchy universe. And this is the first time you've seen this like melting Jake into a whole like scape, like landscape. Yeah. And I wanted to see if you like we're going to catch on to that's probably the most extensive and elaborate Jake stretching we've seen so far.
Well, certainly the one that got me was the Jake bike. I'm like, not sure how the logistics of this thing works. I mean, you got the wheels and the spinning and the stretching and the moving parts. And where do we start? Where do we end? You know what I'm saying? But I mean, I think it's a dope power. It's kind of a really gross, thinking about all that as flesh.
Yeah, exactly.
And moving body parts is kind of gross. But for a cartoon, pretty rad, I gotta say. Jake Bike definitely wins over my favor in this episode. And Finn dresses a maid to accept the package at the Jake door is also nice and goofy,
Yes,
but this is one of the cooler moments we've seen of Jake Powers in a while. I don't think I've gotten a really good Jake Power in a minute. So I was happy to see them kind of be more creative with what he can do. But him having a microverse in his body is kind of disturbing.
That one gets wild, and you start trying to understand the physics of that one, and it doesn't really make sense. But
what's great about this is they're doing a time machine and like a fake time machine, and Finn comes out of nowhere, and he's just like, ooh, and he's like so ready to go, man. He's like, game, like fake time machine day. Hell yeah, let's do this. And then he's dressed up as a maid. Like Finn is just 100% on board to be the coolest, funky uncle of all time. And Jake Jr. doesn't appreciate it, man. Jake Jr. doesn't get it.
It's okay. I mean, I think, okay, I'll save my thoughts for later on. So like, I'm getting too much getting into each story where I want to bring some other aspects of it in. But we want to get the coverage and then we'll get the deep thoughts. So the next coverage jumps right to, they say like, I'm too old for that, or you're too old for that, and jumps to Cinnamon Bun. And first of all, I wanted to say this Cinnamon Bun episode where he's all through the episode, he kind of ties everything together because he's trying to find nice soft light. He's in desperate need to find soft light,
which is a great. Dude, you got to find soft light, man.
Also, it'd be one thing. It'd be one thing if this was like in the castle and it was like keeping PB up at night or something like that. But this is just Cinnamon Bun's house. So like, why does Princess Bubblegum care if he has a nightlight or not? Like, that's what drives me crazy is that he's living independently. Like, why can't he just be allowed to have a nightlight?
How's it creeping everybody out? She said like everybody knows about it. Like it's messing us all up. We're judging you. You got to stop using a nightlight, which I think is nuts. She uses immersion therapy. That's not good.
Yeah,
we're just going to go full dark on him.
Creepier stuff. Then she just built a secondary version of herself to sell to give to Bracco. Like that's pretty creepy. And then just having I think that we don't sleep with a nightlight, but I would not judge people if they're like, I don't like it really dark. I like peaceful, soft light. I get it.
I would judge a little bit just because I was not a nightlight guy. And the reason being, the shadows of the nightlight are more terrifying than the dark itself, in my opinion.
That is true. I've had a couple of nights at my in-laws where I've slept with the fire going in the same room.
Whoa.
And that's kind of nice. So I get even when he sets the place on fire on accident, why he's like, okay, that's pretty nice.
Dude, I think I would have paranoia or anxiety about the fire still being lit. I don't think I could fall asleep with that going.
No, I've been in their house long enough to where those fires burn.
You trust it?
Yeah, they burn fires every day, all day, like all winter, pretty much.
Speaking of trusting fire, Cinnamon Bun freaking kicks over his lamp and ends up burning the entire Candy Kingdom down. I mean, crazy that happened this episode. It gets to what my theoretically speaking is, which I guess we could do that now. It's simple. It's dumb. It's not even a good one, but it's just that none of this actually happened. I don't think the Candy Kingdom's actually burning down here. I don't think that they're actually birds in outer space. Come on, get out of here, Cuber. And I don't think Lemon Grab 2 is going to be dead. I think he's going to be alive and fine. And we'll talk about what happens with Lemon Grab in a minute. And y'all already know. Y'all have seen this before. But yeah, I just don't think the Candy Kingdom's going to be burnt. But I do love that, again, tying together these stories that we get to see even when we're with Ice King, that in the background, the Candy Kingdom's ablaze.
Is on fire when we get to the Ice
King. Turned
King.
around, not looking. Like, you'd think this would be either going, oh my gosh, I got to save the Candy Kingdom, or at this point in the storyline, or he would go, oh, it wasn't me who caused this. This is wrong, like, I don't know. So I thought that was real cool that it tied together. But I just like the banana firefighters are the ones that
are not very good.
They're so incompetent. Are they understaffed? Are they just underpaid? Like,
I think they're just incompetent. Because we saw that a little bit with the One Last Job when they're just like, they just run around chasing, all of Jake's crew. Not even in cars, just 6 of them just like running down the highway as fast as they can.
Mm-hmm. So Cinnamon Bun just rolls over, dog. He's just like, I'm just going to roll over and fall asleep, and I don't even care. It's that soft light finally hitting just right.
Hitting just right. That's why, Princess Bubblegum should just build him a fireplace in his house so he can fall asleep.
Yeah.
But I think I like the transition of this one because, first of all, when the Candy King was burning in the background, when we get to Ice King's palace, is and a funny transition that it's like this can of Yarg in my fridge. How long? I don't even remember buying this. And this got the nice to-do list, checks off all the boxes. And then I love that. I was like, I give the Ice King the most relatable feeling. I got done with my chores early so we can start movie night early. And that is like, that's literally what I'm thinking about doing tonight is getting done with the podcast, hitting my workouts, showering. And then I'm going to do like, I'm alone doing dinner by myself, boy dinner. Which is just going to be steaks and movies. Like,
okay.
And I want to get to that. That's like I'm trying to get there today,
Yeah.
So I feel Ice King in there, but he has penguins joining him too, which I don't know. I think they get my runner up lovely. So I'm not going to give them the sugar baby, but the collective penguins wanting to watch Baby Ballet, that close to getting my lovely.
They're all about it. And if we get his subconscious self with Mr. Fox in a second here. We don't get that with Ice King, but I think his subconscious self was saying, honestly, Baby Ballet is what I wanted to watch because he dresses up like a baby and he's doing ballet as they're watching Basic Mortality.
That was the negotiation tactic.
Oh, you think that's what they negotiated?
Yeah, the penguins whispered of like, we'll watch Basic Mortality if the Ice King dances and dresses up like a baby ballet.
I thought he was just doing that.
No. He's doing baby ballet because the penguins were like, we'll watch Basic Mortality with you if you perform baby ballet for us.
That's great. That's maybe too obvious. I can't believe I missed that.
I think
great.
The penguins almost got my lovely because that's also awesome that they're like, we'll do that with you if you baby ballet for us.
Well, Gunter's not there because I feel like Gunter, being this evil being that he supposedly is, I think he would have asked for something a little bit darker than Ice King dancing like a ballerina in baby clothes.
You got some sweet Gunter moments too, but we also know Gunter's got his own like little private spaces in the Ice Castle too, so it may not be as the collective family movie night.
And I do believe I was a little thrown off in that every one of these at some point, or like there's something about them that are too dark. So was like, oh, maybe the theme has something to do with balance or light and dark or whatever is what was in my mind. But I guess I forget that it's almost always like this one, it means this one means that, and they all tie together. But I just thought it was interesting that as the basic mortality is going on and Isukin's dancing is just like, oh, this is a little bit darker than I remember it being or something. It's like, oh, this is too dark for us to be watching.
Too dark. Oh, man, this is too dark for... He's more concerned about the penguins, like too dark for the penguins too.
Yeah, certainly.
But that transitions us straight to the lemon grabs where Cinnamon Bun runs into... I just assume just like, runs far enough until he gets to the lemon kingdom itself. And they hock a lemon at him, and then they go in. It's creepy, man. This one.
This was a bit dark for my taste.
I've got a lot of deep thoughts on this one that I'm going to save until my deep thought analysis of all this. But we get the lemon playing with lemon sweets, and they can't agree. And essentially, it gets to the point where Lemon Grab 1 eats Lemon Grab 2, and this is canon. Like, so this is the last time you see Lemon Grab 2 like with a full body. So
theoretically speaking is wrong.
It is, yeah. That moment specifically in this episode is why this is.
But it
still
makes
canon.
me think that everything is technically canon in this episode. Then, so maybe at some point, let's watch for the Candy Kingdom and see if there's any sort of signs of repair
in the background, or because it's a different. I mean, you could think some candy melts, some candy burns, some candy caramelizes, like to see if there's any sort of like background sections that are like more
importantly
or something.
This means that there are birds in outer space, and Cuber's got a poop problem, and he needs to figure that poop problem out because that's not good.
There's all the tools were flying around, so the poop probably flying around.
Oh gosh! But I gotta say, my tops for this episode is Lemon Grab playing with lemon sweets, making them dance, and just dead staring at
my tops too. The like, so don't do that. And he's playing with them, but he's dead staring him in the eyes.
You just know he's just cussing them out in his mind. He's just like, you mother effer. Like, I'm going to do this if I want to. And then, of course, he says, we hate you. And then moments later, only one, and just devours him. It's epic. It really is an epic moment in this silly episode. I was not at all expecting. And again, why I was like, oh, another thing that's very dark. Like, that is crazy dark that he's eating the other one that is just like him. That was like the perfect match that like helped him calm down when he wanted,
When we got introduced to Lemon Grab 2, like you remember they had the whole like, poke each other, and then they were like hugging and like nearly making out. Then they locked themselves in the basement trying to make like more candy people out of like the candy seeds and stuff like that. So they've been getting along, and this is a very like, again, you'll see it where we got to think 4 or 5 episodes from now, we're going to be getting into what's actually been going on and like what the next steps are with the Lemon Kingdom too.
Well, they're in this. I mean, I don't blame them. Of course they had a riff. They're in this tiny room, like it's all the same color. It's kind of like everything about it feels like anxiety to me,
But remember, the lemon people are supposed to be, everything is opposite for them.
I know.
So,
I know. And they clearly have had fun. They have a freaking cupboard cupboard on the wall, and it has all these little hats and stuff for lemon sweets. Like, they've had a great time here before. It just finally it's reached the moment, the final straw. And
I'll get to my deep thought analysis later, because it's
so good.
It's gonna, this one specifically gets deeper, the deepest of these Graybles for sure.
Well, but it's great to be back home. Let's get to Mr. Fox, Ned.
Yeah,
let's talk about Mr. Fox.
Let's talk about my lovely of the episode.
Give me some sugar, baby. There we
go. Mr. Fox there. Yeah, I'd say his like monologue at the beginning where he's, hold on, I've got it pulled up in my notes. City Fox has City Fox at his future palace, but you can't beat that country steez. I love that line, man. He's just so happy to be home. And man, I think I just relate with Mr. Fox that like, getting, I like the city and stuff, but like getting back to your home and getting back to your home with all of its flaws, all of its, depressions on the bed and the crazy radiator that almost hit me in, how does he phrase it? Hit me in he didn't say both of my eyes.
Oh, I can't.
Oh gosh, he just phrases it so funny.
I can't remember. I feel like I hope this isn't you, because I think this is him in denial. I think he's truly like hating. I think, what is this lesson? This is depression, right? Like he
So you
isn't
think
actually.
He's depressed and he's
He doesn't love. He goes, "Oh, City Fox's digs are mad sterile." Like I don't think he really believes that. I think he actually admires the fact that everything's clean and neat and nice. And he goes, "Oh, let me give you a little tour of his house." And he's like kind of old and gross, and somehow he's convinced himself that he loves it. He even says, like, "Look at my bugs, man! I always have the ugliest bugs." Like, and his bugs are selling each other houses, which is crazy in this economy. Come on, bugs, you can't be buying houses in this economy.
Yeah, and then I know, and Cinnamon Bun busts a hole in his wall. Yeah. He's like making an excuse. Oh, now it just looks rustic.
It's very rustic. Yeah,
I would have agreed a little bit more.
And then his subconscious self says, "Oh, what a jerk." His subconscious self even says that he's depressed and he doesn't like it.
And his subconscious self is after riches. And like after like
maybe so, or even just adventure. I think that's the thing. I don't even necessarily think it's riches. I think it's just new. It's adventure.
I see what you're saying.
It's something that isn't rustic and old and a hand-me-down, and I mean, gosh, look at his house. It's so beat up. Everything's broken. And he has a giant hole in his wall now because Cinnamon Bun came through and reverse Kool-Aid Manned it.
Okay, yeah. I see. I think maybe there's aspects of that, I guess, where I'm analyzing it from my life perspective and like getting cozy in a cozy house. But yeah, I think even how it ties into my like larger theory of all of this, that does make sense. It's. I wish that was just tied with the denial piece, just in general.
I agree.
Not necessarily with depression per se.
Well, it brings up an interesting thought in my mind. I mean, certainly, I think Mr. Fox has depression because of his lack of adventure. He wants to go on this treasure hunt in his subconscious mind, And Ned, have you ever heard of a man named Gold Roger?
No, I have not.
Oh, okay. So Gold Roger, I mean, so it's said, he had fame, he had power, wealth beyond your wildest dreams. And if I'm not mistaken, before he died, he told the world that he left everything he owned in one place. Sorry.
I was like, hold on, one piece, like the show?
One Piece? Yeah, like the show. I just had to put One Piece in here somewhere. Wait, but I knew you wouldn't get it. I should have made you watch something One Piece related before this. Dang it.
So that is the treasure.
This is the intro to every episode of One Piece for like the entire first season.
Okay,
Sorry. Poor jokes. Didn't work. Moving on.
Moving on.
The adventure, Gold Roger. I love it.
I know. Well, you got to sneak in your One Piece in here all the time, don't you?
I had to, but I guess I worded it wrong. My framing was bad. But moving on.
Well, I've got more to talk about with that in general, but it goes back and we wrap up our episode with Cinnamon Bun finally. They're about to finish their V8 engine in the suitcase, time machine in the house. Jake Jr. is not impressed. I love that Jake and Finn are just having fun in general, but let's talk about freaking awesome. BMO's intruder alert protocol is absolutely incredible.
It's terrible. My most punchable character is BMO. Yeah. It's easily BMO. I can't do that. It's just so terrifying. Me. Dude, it's more terrifying. More terrifying than the dark. I mean, it's easily just knowing that alarm could go off at any moment freaks me out. And it makes me not want to hang out with BMO in my house as my personal roommate, assistant, buddy guy.
God, did you not feel that way during school then? Like growing up to where like, I don't know, maybe it was just my schools. With the fire alarm, they just like would scare the shit out of you. Like,
yeah, I mean, imagine that, but it's BMO and BMO could do it at any moment. Yeah. BMO's always there with you.
But then also being in such a big tree house and then having a lot of, like monsters and enemies around, I would be like, feel somewhat more comforted that BMO's going to have that reaction if anybody breaks into the house.
It would probably scare them away. I
can tell you, life hack, my Alexa has, if I tell Alexa intruder alert, I used to have the color bulbs hooked up, but our bulbs are supposed to turn green. Then she turns up the volume all the way to 10. Then she says, "What are you doing in my swamp?" And then it starts playing, "Somebody
somebody once told me, and that's my intruder alert on Alexa.
That's pretty wild
to scare people away.
That's pretty good, but pretty wild, Ned.
But that's
well,
like,
Cuba
I like
pauses it because this is where he gets the freaking door hole for his birdhouse, and we have a moment where, like, he even admits, like, "Oh, y'all don't want to know try and guess what the lessons are. All right, let's just watch the rest of the Grayble just for the sake of seeing the ending." And that's where I was. I was like, I'm lost on what the lessons are or what the connection is with all of these. Let's just finish it and see what happens. And of course, Cinnamon Bun gets a nightlight, another Jake pose, or I think the first one was Jake's head, and then this one is Jake posing.
Yeah.
Which I remember. I can't remember what episode it was, but I know we've seen that pose before. Like, very specifically, that exact pose was from a prior episode. But I can't remember what it was. And Finn and Jake have the fake newspaper, and I love that. They're like, "Oh yeah, if the time machine didn't work, then how do we have this newspaper?" And on it says tomorrow's newspaper.
Yeah, exactly.
And the headline is Jake Jr., real cool kid.
Real cool kid.
Yeah.
It's Jake. I mean, after we just had the One Last Job episode, he's like, now he's overcompensating. Jake Jr. is like, stop overcompensating a little bit. I'm too old and existential and deep thinking now. And this is where I think, again, just this all collectively happening is what brings it full circle. And Jake Jr. is like, yeah, it's okay. Like, look, my dad's goofy, BMO's goofy, this is goofy. That's kind of the beauty of, like, just life is just having fun and all of that, even though we're not knowing about the future and things like that too. So it's cool. I think that's her, like, absolution at this end of the episode. It's a little bit more like okay with where things are at,
So the wrap up, the 5 stages of grief, I mean, because again, went over my head when I first watched this. The first one, denial, Cinnamon Bun's denial, soft light. And this is kind of me, what my thought is. So Ned, if you have different thoughts on any of these, why they work, the different stages work for the different Graybles, please butt in and let me know. But I think the denial piece is Cinnamon Bun's denial of soft light and the refusal of living in a light or dark world. So it's kind of 2 parts. It's like PB is denying him the nightlight, and then he is, like, refusing to live in a place that isn't soft lit. Bargaining is the next one. This is the only one, in my opinion, that was really spelled out for us, because Ice King straight up says, he's like, okay, well, I can still bargain with the Penguins on what to watch. And of course, I was thinking it was just something that would pay off later in a different episode. Or I just didn't realize, obviously they forced him to dress up like a baby, which seems way too obvious now that we're talking about it.
That was the bargain. Yeah.
And then anger, of course, is lemon grab, argument, and over lemon sweets. And depression is Mr. Fox, the tour that he gives of his old decrepit house. And here's the tough one. And I have a lot of things that I wrote down that this could be what the acceptance is. I know what the wiki says, and I'm a little annoyed at what the wiki says. But you got acceptance. You go Jake and Jake Jr.'s storyline. So I guess that Jake Jr. is 30 and doesn't want to play make believe. So is that acceptance on Jake's part, that he has to accept the fact that Jake Jr. is too old now? Is it that you're never too old to goof off? Is that the acceptant part that Jake Jr. learns later on in the episode? Is it that the future is going to come no matter what, so you shouldn't be so fearful of it? Is that you should just do you and sleep with the nightlight if you want? Is it the fact that Finn at the beginning of the episode happened to accept a package from Jake at the doorway as a maid at the beginning of the Graybles? Is that what the acceptance is? Because I think that's freaking goofy if that's what the acceptance is, because that's what the wiki says.
No, that seems a little convoluted in my opinion.
Yeah,
like a little bit.
It's
just
so
like,
not obvious in any way.
I think the acceptance, if we're talking about each one has its own standalone thing that somewhat fits in this realm, is that the acceptance is Jake Jr.'s problem was that she was not enjoying her time with her dad because she was depressed about having these existential thoughts about the future, and that the acceptance comes in that specific story. That's the story about acceptance, that where she, along those lines, goes, yes, I accept that the future is scary, and I'm going to just enjoy the present because I wasn't enjoying it before. That's where I think that that ties in. However, I think that if you even look at our other Graybles, what the last one was like the 5 flavors, it was like sour, sweet, umami, like all that kind of stuff. When what we saw more in the episode was about the 5 fingers. It was like the thumb, the index finger, the middle finger, the ring finger. Remember that we were like, that's the obvious theme, but the Grayble itself, oh yeah, this is all tied together because of the 5 tastes. And I was like, no, like, so I think that that's what they're making a joke of, is it's like the 5 stages of grief, but no one's grieving, maybe except for Jake Jr. in this episode. I think the real story, so this was actually an episode, factoid, you're coming your way, about, like it was a Father's Day episode, which is great. It was Father's Day was literally, as we're recording this, it was last Sunday. So I saw some theories online and developed my own kind of around it about this is like a childcare episode. So lots of different stages and phases of childcare and what that looks like as well.
Okay.
Because if you think about it.
So the nightlight.
Yeah, it kind of kicks off like we have our starting and ending point. Starts with Jake Jr. So that's kind of like maybe our like, you know, where are we now? What we're supposed to be thinking about as ourselves, you know, as we're Jake Juniors per se.
Okay.
But then the story of like our parents in our childcare starts with Princess Bubblegum, like taking care of Cinnamon Bun, and he's like a baby, and it's just true. Like getting over your nightlight, you got to grow up, kid. Like, come on, that causes like a panic. And the next phase is Ice King and the penguins, kind of like a little bit with like
kids bargaining with them to get them to do anything, I guess.
So yeah, bargaining with your kids, like on the cusp, you know, there was like 3 like baby movies and 1 like adult movie. Like, okay, are you guys, is this a little too dark? Can we take the next phase into, and again, I'm kind of stepping away. It's not about bargaining. It's just about like, hey, the phase of life here is like,
oh, that's right. Yeah.
You know, when do we want the kids to grow up a little bit? Or should we step lightly into bigger movies, stop watching baby movies a little bit, but doing it a little bit more gracefully than taking away a nightlight straight up.
And then the next one is if you happen to go down the path of devouring your child, right? If you end up eating your kid.
No.
Once they reach 10, you can either choose to eat your child or... Oh, is that not what this is?
No, not at all. So I think the lemon grab one is way deeper than that because you see lemon sweets is supposed to be the child that they're taking care of, and that they're fighting. Parents. And yeah, the 2 lemon grabs are the parents, and that
obviously the
devouring is somewhat of a divorce, and it gets so much to the point where
brutal.
If childcare was not done correctly, it leads to the divorce of the parents, and then lemon sweets gets thrown on the floor and shatters into a million pieces.
Oh man.
So it's like the total destruction of like your youth and your innocence because your parents are literally just fighting about like whether or not you want to do something that's arbitrary or like, no, I want to raise our kids this way. No, I think that they should play this. And that almost like, does raising kids like,
yeah, because even in that scenario,
as a parent, you know,
like Lemon Sweet sees that as maybe it was his fault, right? Like that's the big thing is like the kid feeling like they're the reason why the parents are getting divorced. It's not necessarily because of Lemon Sweets that the lemon grabs are breaking up. It's because of a bigger issue that probably a million tiny things caused. Well,
and then leading into that, it goes into Mr. Fox, which I think can be interpreted a lot of different ways. But if you were kind of going along that train of raising children or whatever, it's kind of like, wow, you're an empty nester and you're by yourself, like post a divorce, and you're trying to be like, yeah, I got divorced so I could be happier. Yeah, I'm alone. My kids grew up and I'm alone, and that you're like, isn't my life so great? When it's like, again, that's kind of like it's really sad, and you're like trying to make sense of like, yeah, I thought I did all the right things, and I'm like faking it, you know. And that's why that story feels weird. It's not just depression. It's not just acceptance. It's not just denial. It's a combination of all those things. But it's kind of like the at the end of the child raising, you can end up all alone. And then that's kind of like scary. And then that, I think, full circle goes back into the Jake Jr. stuff. Of course, it's with her dad, and it's in this pivotal moment of him, quote unquote, raising his kids. He didn't really get to raise his kids either. But what Jake Jr.'s point about like existential, we don't know what's going to happen in the future. Essentially, we don't really know what's going to happen with raising our kids, but to live in fear of the bad things that could happen, which is kind of like what this episode, I think, lays out. It's kind of like how, how raising kids could get messed up. If you do that in fear, you're going to miss the enjoyment of playing what's going on right in front of you, which is playing Time Machine with her dad, Yeah.
Dang.
So I thought that was a little bit more cohesive of a story and theme.
Mm-hmm.
Not 100% put together. I didn't get the time to, put this into an essay and have it
that's fair.
Criticized by my peers. So.
None of any podcast that we've ever done. I mean, we certainly write down notes, right? But that's great, Ned. I think that's really interesting. I think it's a more compelling argument for what the lessons are to these Graybles than I feel like 5 stages of grief. It feels like when you're watching a new show and then you're just like, oh, they represent the 7 deadly sins. Like, that it feels so overdone at this point. Like, so I think what you're saying, like stages of childhood development or parenting, is way more fascinating to me than what we said initially.
Yeah, and you could see, like again, it's either in I think the Adventure Time world. What ties this into a Grayble is like the fact that it's just like the 5 stages of grief were mentioned, or Qbert is just like a loner, and he's just like, why are these stories all thrown together? And the only thing he could come to sense with is that it's about the 5 stages of grief, because they just say those words, but the real cohesiveness of the story is like a parenting deeper one that he's never going to know about because who's he parenting? He doesn't know that,
Yeah. Man, well, hopefully we don't end up like Mr. Fox one day. And hopefully I don't end up like Cooper one day where I'm just alone watching my thousands of birds that I have inside of my house.
Seriously. I was about to say, man, I know he was your lovely, but he was my most punchable just because I can't do the Dora the Explorer, let third wall breaking. Like,
I know it sucked. I agree. It totally did suck, but I feel like we haven't given him enough love. And I always give BMO love. So I like the fact that BMO did something that annoyed me this episode. So I could take advantage of that a little bit.
Yeah.
Well, Ned, let's wrap up talking about another 5 short Graybles, if that's all right with you.
I think we hammered that one into the ground for sure.
And let's get to the next segment that we do every episode. That is not Traveler's Log. Instead, this is going to be Adventure Time news.
Oh yeah.
I was going to do this at the beginning of the episode, but it felt like we were already transitioning into the episode, so I just kind of ran with it. But man, we had some news come out. I mean, this is all going to be old news at this point because obviously this podcast doesn't come out right away. We record these a little bit in advance. And I hope that we don't have too much more information in the future so that this is totally dated and a way. I mean, eventually it will be. But for now, what we know is that there's going to be an Adventure Time movie, which that alone, I think... I've seen people be pretty upset or annoyed or like, oh, why is this way or this that way? I think we should all be really excited. The fact that they're investing more money into a movie that they're developing and going to put out. I mean, that's incredible. We didn't 2 weeks ago, a week ago, we didn't even think we were ever going to get anything. All we knew about was Fiona and Cake season 2. But I wonder if Fiona and Cake season 1 did so good that they're like, okay, let's invest more money and time into Adventure Time content, and it's going to be developed with Rebecca Sugar, who of course wrote a bunch of Adventure Time songs. She created Steven Universe. She was led a hand in like writing episodes and storyboarding. Patrick McHale, who did Over the Garden Wall and also is an old time Adventure Time guy. Adam Muto, who is an Adventure Time showrunner,
again, the majority of them, especially through these seasons,
everything. And I'm not very cued in on what happened with Pendleton Ward, or like what the thing is, like why he isn't as involved in this as
he could
everybody else
be
is.
a little bit like George Lucasing it, like, you know, I
don't
created this as it is, and let me, you know, give.
But
over
does he
some
feel that way?
rights.
I haven't seen
I don't know.
him say anything. Yeah,
that would be my general assumption.
But I don't even know why he stopped. It's not like I don't think did he sell it? Like I don't know. Let's not talk. Like we don't know.
We don't know
what the reason why he's not involved in is. But I did think it was really fascinating that Jeremy Shada, I believe, and this is, I'll say allegedly because I don't really remember, but I'm pretty dang positive that he posted on his story when that news broke that he didn't even know that the movie was happening, and that he found out about it through like the news breaking on Variety, just like we all did, which I think that alone probably scared some people. But I can't imagine you're not going to have Jeremy Shada involved. I mean, he's the voice of Finn, for crying out loud.
Yeah, no,
and
he's going to be involved for sure.
I mean, whatever the movie is about, but especially the next thing we'll talk about, which is Adventure Time Side Quest, which is going to be early Jake and early Finn doing kids, like a kid series, doing like fun season 1 type adventures. I would have to assume Jeremy Shada is going to be where you go for early Finn voicing.
It's gonna be hard because I know he's older. Naturally, his voice is like developed, and that's why he's like really good at doing Big Buff Finn from Fiona and Cake. So
I don't know, but I love the idea of this is just like Finn as a kid, like dreaming of being an epic adventurer, just like Billy, and going out and fighting monsters, doing quests with his best friend, the dog, you know, Jake the dog, of course.
And that takes it back to essentially they can write more stuff that's like more familiar to season 1, where it's just we're not tying canon events to canon events and things like that, where it's just like let's just go out and do stuff.
I don't even need lore, man. Like what I want is them to do really epic, cool adventures. Like it doesn't have to be crazy, insanely mature. Like I know the other criticism is why isn't it growing up with the audience? And I'm like, man,
I think that
I saw Rugrats All Grown Up. You know, I was there for that. It wasn't all that great. Like we've seen the iCarly reboot, and they're doing like dumb adult jokes, and that's no one's talking about that. You know, so like, what's wrong with them going back and doing these early adventures and having it be one-offs? And like, let's just tell really epic, awesome, cool stories that kids will love, and that all the Adventure Time fans will appreciate the fact that, oh, they just had like, even like say you have a sad one, it could be crazy sad, but then just be like a one-off, you know. Hopefully it's not all just like, here's a robot, we built it, we went to the tree, and then this happened, and now it's done.
They will make it a deep show still, but if you think about it, they've got enough of like with Fiona and Cake, if we're getting to season 2 of that, they're going to let kind of maybe more of the adult themes, the adult writing, the language, the relationships to be more adult in its own world. So they are delivering something for the older audience, but we're not straying too far away. Fiona and Cake strayed a little bit far away from what felt like Adventure Time, because it felt real. We got more of like a real universe, which it was great. I thought that creatively that was great. But if we are going, what's like true to Adventure Time, it's deep stories about real internal kind of like what we deal with as human consciousness type problems, told through a crazy universe, a crazy made up post-apocalyptic universe. And it doesn't have to be lore, but it does have to be meaningful and deep and part of like a human experience. So that can still absolutely be done through that kind of spinoff.
Yeah. And the last one is the Adventure Time Heyo Bimo, which it's going to be a preschool series of the most lovable character there is in Adventure Time. And I got to say, I think there's a real high chance that we're going to get a pretty high cuteness rating on this one. I think it's going to be adorable.
Pretty high lovely rating per episode.
Yeah, everyone's going to be lovely. It's going to be good. I'm thinking good vibes, even if it's not for us. This might be, I mean, if you're talking about growing up with your audience, what's more growing up with your audience than going, oh, our audience is having babies now. So
well, yeah, because like that's the thing.
For the babies.
I want to watch Adventure Time stuff with my kid one day, but like, geez, there are some episodes that like you're probably not going to be good to do until you're like at least 7-8 years old. With especially like lich stuff like that I don't know, it just borderline's going to be like too much for kids. So having something that's a little bit more easy to watch and introductory. I think it's a great idea.
Yeah, and all the moms at my office love Bluey, and I hope that this is like a Bluey thing where, you know, it is adorable and all that stuff, and like there's little bits and pieces for the adults. I mean, we'll see, but regardless, like I said, it's gonna be adorable. It's gonna be great, y'all. Thank you so much for joining us. This was a fun episode. I think watching it was even better than some of the other Grayble episodes.
Absolutely, I think this one's the best of the 3 we've had so far.
So I was a little bit less hesitant to go into it, right, and give it its amount of time to prepare for this episode. But yeah, thank you for joining us. If you want to like dig deeper into the podcast and help support us, help us pay for, you know, I mean,
pretty much
production is the main thing. But I was going to say promotion, but we really don't promote it via money in any way. But I do want to freaking get some merch one day. That would be awesome. Anyways. Check it out at patreon.com/neverendingadventure podcast. We've got another podcast that we do for the Patreon specifically. And, you know, we've got the coolest Discord and we watched a movie together like we talked about last week. And can't wait to do more of that. Check us out on Instagram at Never Ending Adventure Podcast, TikTok at Never Ending Adventure Cast, Twitter at NEA_podcast. Email us your thoughts, your opinions. Get on the Traveler's Log. We'll do a Traveler's Log next week. I didn't do one because of the news and I wanted to talk about the news. But it's nea.travelerslog@gmail.com. We've got YouTube. We've got 1,000 subscribers on YouTube, which is wild because we don't post anything there, but we will. I have an idea. I want to develop it.
Get their podcast content from YouTube.
Yeah, totally. The podcast is on YouTube as well. But I do have an idea for like some potential like podcast episode summaries or something. We'll figure it out. But if we ever have a visual element, YouTube will be the place for that. So definitely go ahead and subscribe. Ned, let's do Rex before we head out. What's your Rex this week?
Let's do our recommendations. Mine is a wonderful movie that my wife and I watched last week out of the blue. It's called Boy Kills World. And it just came out end of last year, beginning of this year. It's basically Bill Skarsgård as a stripped from his family, like a ninja baby, turned guru in the woods, gets his tongue ripped out, voiced by John Benjamin, who is Bob Belcher from Bob's Burgers, as his inner monologue is Bob's Belcher voice.
Okay.
And it's basically have you seen the movie Kick-Ass? And then have you seen Kill Bill?
Yes.
It's like a combination of those two movies. So it's goofy and funny, like fun, and the dialogue's hilarious and the situations, but the universe they built and the violence in it is like Kill Bill. So really cool. And again, we just watched it. And I was like, this seems fun. This seems funny. Both my wife and I were just like, that's probably the best movie we've watched all year. So I would 100% recommend that.
Okay. Remind me, what's it called?
Boy Kills World.
Okay, cool. Yeah, we'll look it up. That's great.
What about you?
My rec is a YouTube channel, and more specifically, a game that the YouTube channel plays. I've gotten into Smosh Pit. I've never been a Smosh guy. I know Smosh has been around for, all of YouTube.
Watched all of the Smosh videos pre-YouTube when it was just Smosh.com.
Oh, wow.
And it was, you were either getting like your internet days. It was like, what was it? Something arcade games, E-Bombs World, and Smosh.com. So we were watching their Pokemon video. They're like, so I think it's cool. Funny that they still do stuff too.
It was like early YouTube. They've been around for forever. They might never stopped creating content, but then at one point they sold. And then, they got investors, I think, and then they sold to Mythical, which I love, Mythical Morning. And then they just recently rebought their channel, and Anthony came back.
Oh, I was going to ask if Mythical still owns it.
Yeah, so it's a whole, like, it's its own thing again. And they've developed, kind of like how Mythical is having Good Mythical Kitchen, and they're constantly trying to build up other creators within their, like, home. So it's like all part of a Smosh family type thing. And so you have these comedians that are part of Smosh that isn't just Ian and Anthony, it's everybody else now, but they do something called Beppardy, which is just Jeopardy, but like dumb topics and awesome topics and stuff. And they're all just so hilarious. And even though I don't know any of the context for any of the inside jokes, I find it very funny. There's another, if you're not just looking up a Jeopardy episode, but The Chosen is a character that one of the main guys created. His name's Shane, and he created The Chosen kind of to make fun of another character. And it's just this nerdy guy. And I highly recommend going and watching. There's an episode we just watched last night of, gosh, I wish I had written down what it's called, but especially like if you looked up The Chosen Multiverse, I think you might come across it. It's a game where they all play as it's like 5 people pretending to be the chosen character, and it's hilarious. But yeah, that's my rec is to go check out Smosh Pit. It's funny. I didn't think I'd ever be a Smosh fan, but here I am.
Here you are, man.
Yeah. Well, y'all, thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate y'all listening to another episode of the Never Ending Adventure podcast. And we'll be back next week. Ned, do you have any idea of what we'll be talking about?
I did a second. It's going to be like helping LSP figured out a crime that was committed. Okay.
Cool. Another criminal crime episode.
I think we're going to get a decent, good LSP episode next week.
Yeah. Spoilers. It's Jit Jr. All right. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next week. Party forever.